Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Jessica Feldmark. I am chair of the House delegation from Howard County, and I want to welcome you this evening to our public bill hearing. Senator Lamb, the Senate chair, is going to be joining us a little bit later. He had a conflict and he'll be joining us in progress. Thank you all for being here. We do have quite a few folks signed up who want to speak with us this evening, and we are looking forward to hearing from all of you. Tonight, we will be hearing local legislation that was not heard at our November public hearing, and we'll also be taking testimony on statewide legislation. If you are testifying on one item this evening, you will have up to 3 minutes to testify. If you are testifying on 2 or more items, you will have up to 5 minutes. And I want to stress that up to, you don't have to fill the time. We do have a lot of folks who are going to be waiting to testify. So if you are able to express your thoughts in less time, that brevity is greatly appreciated. Our delegation administrator, Rebecca Doring, please wave, Rebecca, so folks see you, will be running a timer for your testimony, and that timer will actually be showing in her square on the Zoom screen, so you can keep an eye on your progress. When time is up, she will say, "That's time." That means your time is up. And she'll give you about a 5-second grace period, but we are going to be pretty strict on time tonight because we do have a lot of folks waiting to speak, and we want to make sure we get a chance to hear from everyone. If you do not have a chance to complete your thoughts and say everything you wanted to say, it's okay. We want to hear everything you want to tell us. Please email us anything that you were not able to fit into your allotted time, and we appreciate that written testimony as well. We are going to go ahead and get started. I will be calling folks to testify, and I will also be letting you know the next few people in line. Ms. Doring will be admitting people from the waiting room as we go, so that you'll be in the Zoom meeting before you need to start speaking. And as soon as you're done with your testimony, we do ask that you log off from the Zoom meeting, and you can watch the remainder of the hearing on the YouTube live stream. Just as a reminder to delegation members, in the interest of time, we will not be stopping to ask for questions after each person testifies. If you have any questions as you're listening to the testimony, please raise your Zoom hand while they are speaking, so we don't miss any questions, but also don't waste time asking for them if there are no questions. Okay. So first up, we have Maureen Arthurs on behalf of the county administration for HOCO 1524, and she will be followed by Karen Biederman and Karina Fisher. Ms. Arthurs, please go ahead.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so good evening, members of the delegation. My name is Maureen Evans Arthurs, and I serve as the Director of Government Affairs for County Executive Calvin Ball. I'm here tonight to speak on HOCO 15-24. This is a pretty simple bill which amends the state agricultural code to allow the terms of members who serve on Howard County's Agricultural Preservation Board to have a consistent term length. Several years ago, our charter was amended to reduce all board terms from 5 years to 3 years. So this legislation will essentially allow the terms to run concurrently. It doesn't alter the current term lengths. Members will still be able to finish out their term and then, of course, reapply for another term. But basically, this just creates consistency and a concurrent term length. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are any, or feel free to send an email.
Thank you. And thank you for modeling brevity in your testimony. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Arthurs. So next up, we have Karen Biederman, followed by Karina Fisher and Sarah Ahmed. You can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, members of the delegation. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I'm Karen Biederman. I am the Dunlogan Middle School PTA president and the mother of a 6th and 8th grader at Dunlogan. I'd like to offer my sincere gratitude to delegates Watson, Wu, Ziegler, and Senator Hester in my support for Bill 1624, the differences in capital budget proposals, as our BOE desperately needs to have standardized processes by which they evaluate capital improvement needs driven by objective data only, not public outcry and demands. Every year, the list of schools that are ranked for capital improvement needs gets reprioritized without any transparent information to the public. Dunlogan Middle School has shifted 3 times in the last 3 years on that list. The lists that are proposed from the superintendent and the BOE are not harmonized, causing further discord and confusion to the communities in Howard County. Currently, Dunlogan Middle School has the highest capital improvement needs, 50% than any other school, but was not selected for the FY25 budget due to confusion over which schools qualified for Built to Learn funding. The CIP scoring criteria and weighting was posted on board docs on August 31st, and it was discussed extensively on the September 7th BOE meeting by Mr. Lubley. No one had any objections. On November 16th, 70 days after the September 7th criteria meeting, the totality score of the capital improvement needs was discussed. Several board members at that time questioned the validity of the methodology from the meeting 10 weeks prior. To restate, none of the BOE members questioned the methodology on the September 7th meeting. They only raised concerns when Dunlogan was revealed to be 50% higher than any other school in the CIP needs on November 16th. I asked for this totality of scores several times, but it was only given the information after the September 28th vote. Moving forward, information of this significance need to be shared transparently with the public concurrently with discussions prior to voting. So with the CIP scoring chart results and Built to Learn funding, there is no reason that Dunlogan was not chosen to be on the FY25 budget. Like Dr. Chin stated, Dunlogan was ahead of other schools 2 years ago. On November 16th, BOE members had the chance to correct their mistakes, but the vote fell 3-4. My kids will be long past middle school age before Dunlogan Middle School is renovated or replaced. In the meantime, Dunlogan Middle School has more overcrowding than last year at 119.2%, 54 kids per toilet, not bathroom toilet. It is 50 years old with unsanitary conditions. Mice and rats are overrunning the building along with cockroaches and termites. The roof has leaked twice this month alone. Today, paint chips and dust were falling from the ceiling when a gym ball hit the ceiling. I called the health department and they stated any building built prior to 1978, there is an assumption that there is lead paint. On January 4th, that school lost power for 2 hours and kids sat in very dark, cold rooms because the generator did not kick in. As the generator boiler.
Time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's time.
Okay. So my support's for 1624. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, please feel free to email us anything that you weren't able to finish in your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have Karina Fisher, followed by Sarah Ahmed and Terry Marcus.
Okay, I think I was able to unmute. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Hello, good evening. I do want to say thank you for tonight and the opportunity to testify. My name is Karina Fisher, and I'm an Ellicott City resident who has a child in our school system. Tonight, I'm here to testify in support of HOCO 1624. I'm happy to see this proposed legislation out of drafting and officially filed. I want to say a thank you to all that have signed on in support already, and to say those names out loud. They are delegates Courtney Watson, Chow Wu, Natalie Ziegler, and Senators Katie Hester and Clarence Lamb. I hope to see this worked on and passed unanimously. It is a desperate piece of proposed legislation that is needed. The language so far in this proposed legislation simply discusses the requirement for the Howard County Board of Education to publish a report on the HCPSS website, which highlights the differences between the superintendent's proposed capital budget and the capital budget approved by the Board of Education. This sounds like the start of some sort of accountability, and that is exactly what our community is looking forward to. There has been many years where the capital budget voting doesn't make sense. There are schools bumped, schools pushed forward, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. It is the Hunger Games at the end of every capital budget cycle, and people are showing up with air filters that are black with soot. There are horror stories of ceilings falling down. All sorts of things are going on, and it seems to be whoever can fill the room and tell the latest story is gaining ground, or somehow that's not happening in any other school. Dunlogan's roof came down in our media center years ago. We've already testified about that. Now we're on to bigger things like our entire electrical system blowing out because an up-to-date kiln got plugged in and our out-of-date system couldn't handle it. So it needs to be a systematic, predictable system that is based on need and that relies on the data that the HCPSS school system puts forth, in addition to the data set that is put forth by the AAC. This year has been a horrendous first row seat into a blatant disregard for both sets of data. And we hear on the replays, anybody can hear quotes from Board of Education members questioning the validity of the data from the school system and also the state. And it's almost basically taking that professional experience and putting in place, if there's no engineering background or data background, it's an opinion at this point, and that just does not belong in our capital budget system. And I think that was my time.
Yeah, that's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do not see Sarah Ahmad on the wait list, so I've let Terry Marcus in.
Okay, wonderful. Ms. Marcus, please go ahead. And just to let folks know, next up will be Corinne Happel, and followed by Kevin Chin, followed by Keith Olinger.
Good evening, everyone. I am the president of the PTA Council of Howard County. I am testifying tonight on behalf of PTAC. I first want to thank delegates Wu, Hill, Terrassa, and Ziegler for introducing Bill 1824 and for including a role for PTAC on the proposed task force. PTAC supports 18-24 and the identification of any other dedicated sources of revenue to pay for the deferred maintenance in our schools, a number that has ballooned from a little over 500 million to an excess of 800 million over the past 10 years. I have even heard the $1 billion number used, but I'm sure you all have access to the specific numbers. If we could amend the bill at all, it would be to include some assurance that the task force not analyze and propose a redistribution that would result in less revenue going to the school system, including the 25% that currently goes into the school site acquisition and construction fund. That said, we do wish that we could skip the whole task force phase and move straight into the implementation phase of securing the additional funding, because it is especially true in the case of deferred maintenance that time is money. Had repairs and replacements been completed in a timely manner, the total cost would certainly have been less than what we are now facing. Things that would have initially cost a few $100s to repair end up costing thousands in the long run when a problem isn't properly addressed in the first place. Additionally, the cost of parts and labor to make these repairs in just the last few years have skyrocketed. Safe and healthy schools should be a top priority for all of our leaders. The Board of Education has encouraged all of our local elected officials to find revenue sources dedicated to the purpose of funding long-term facilities maintenance for several years. Safe and healthy schools, though, are more than just a priority. They are a requirement. COMAR 13A.1.04.03 requires that all students in Maryland's public schools have the right to educational environments that are A, safe, and B, appropriate for academic achievement. Deferred maintenance with the state's ability interferes with the state's ability to provide both of these. Doubtless many of you have heard parents and PTA members testify about the need to fix things in our school buildings just a few seconds ago. These repairs and replacements include HVAC systems, boilers, paint, lighting, plumbing, emergency generators, school concession stands, restrooms, doors, windows, carpets, electrical systems, roofing, paving, water heaters, playgrounds, masonry, and many others. When we have a lackluster pace of new school construction, we need to, at a bare minimum, keep the schools we do have in good and usable shape. The state of our school buildings speaks to the state of our priorities as a community. Wow, that was really fast. I will go ahead and send everything that I have written via email.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Corinne Happel is not here, so we would move on to
Okay.
Kevin Chin.
All right. Mr. Chin, please go ahead.
Hello, hi, my name is Kevin Chin. I'm testifying this evening on behalf of the Howard County Housing Affordability Coalition on Howard County Bill 14, 2024, which would establish a task force to consider changing the formula for how the county transfer tax is currently allocated. As stated, the task force charge would include, but not be limited to, exploring the feasibility of increasing the allocation for the Howard County school system. Increasing the HCPSS allocation would mean decreasing the allocation to one or more of the other transfer tax recipients. As that is the case, the task force should include representation from the stakeholder groups that would or could be affected by any change in the allocation. Currently, the task force membership would include the county executive or his designee, 2 council members, 4 school representatives. We strongly urge that the task force membership be expanded to include fire safety, housing, agriculture, and recreation and parks representation. The 2 appointed residents should have an understanding of the value, purposes, and uses of the transfer tax to each of these entities. If there are to be discussions of changing the distribution of the transfer tax, all parties should be at the table. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony this evening. We'd be pleased to discuss the coalition's perspective with you, Dr. Wu, and with other members of the delegation. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Olinger, who will be followed by David Plummer, followed by Councilmember Deb Young.
All right. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you all very much. I'm Keith Olinger, 2790 Florence Road, Woodbine, Maryland, 21797. I'm coming to you tonight as a private citizen and a farmer in the local community. I asked you to oppose 1824 because when I looked at it, this is all covered in minute detail every year by the Department of Finance when they go through their budget considerations. But when I looked at it even closer, what's odd is that no one except for the school system is included in the composition of the task force. And so it seems that when we already have this information available, it's odd to have to need 2 years to do it and then have no one else that's involved in the determination of who receives the funding. So I'm suspicious because I imagine this is another attempt to come after the Ag Preservation Fund. So let me just bring everybody up to speed here on what we're looking at. The county experienced a property value increase during COVID, which is great for the property tax base. But what it did was it increased the price of homes. And so the amount of the transfer tax went down. So the amount that was in the fund also went down. So transfer tax income went down from 12 million in 2022 to 8 million in 2023 and is estimated to be 6 million in 2024. That's a 50% decrease in 2 years. Plus, over the year and a half, the investments that they use for the remainder that's in the fund have gone down 150 basis points. So what you end up having is you have 2 million in operating expenses that include valuable services for the Howard Soil Conservation District, Howard County Economic Development Authority, University of Maryland Extension, community sustainability, and also Howard Economic Development Authority, the Ag Pres Board, so the 5 of them. The bulk of the money that's in the fund for the next 4 years, that 16 to 18 million, is actually for the balloon payments from easements that occurred in 1990. So this is money that you promised these folks that you would give them so they would take their money, their land out of development and put it into agricultural preservation. So this is something that we owe them. So looking forward, the fund isn't going to start to recover until sometime between 2028 and 2030, which means there's no real point to try and do a 2-year task force right now. What you get for that investment of $2 million is agriculture. It's the #1 industry in Maryland. It's top 5 always in the county. What you have to look at is the county budget is $2.16 billion, and $1.1 billion of that goes to the Howard Public School. So what I would say is we are extremely frugal, efficient, and you get an incredible return on your investment. There's nothing to find here. It'd be a waste of time. So I encourage you to vote no on 1824. Thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. Next up, we have David Plummer, followed by Councilmember Deb Young, followed by Brian Liu.
Are you able to hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Plummer.
Great. All right, thanks. My name is David Plummer, and I'm the District Manager of the Howard Soil Conservation District. I'm testifying tonight on behalf of the Howard Soil Conservation District Board of Supervisors, who would like to express their concerns regarding HOCO 1824. The Howard Soil Conservation District assists farmers with the design and implementation of conservation practices that help protect our local streams and restore the Chesapeake Bay. Our concern with Local Bill 1824 is that the underlying objective is to divert funding away from the highly successful agricultural preservation program. Legislation of this nature has come from the delegation in the past, although it's been several years, and the agricultural community has always opposed the concept. I would like to note that although the agricultural community is a stakeholder in the transfer tax allocation, they were omitted from the task force. Not sure if that was an oversight or intentional, but it elevates suspicions regarding the underlying goal of the bill. I would also note that Howard County seems to be the only jurisdiction that brings forward this type of legislation. A few points for the delegation to consider as part of this task force bill. There are over 3,000 acres of agricultural land left to preserve in Howard County, which represents much more investment than what is currently available through the Agricultural Preservation Fund. The county has recently improved and updated the ag preservation payment options with more attractive interest rates, down payments, and term lengths. It is not yet clear how much more interest this will create in the Ag Pres program or what those costs will be. Grant funding from ag preservation is being used to support a variety of innovative and creative projects for established farmers, as well as new farm operations, including urban agricultural projects. The county executive and county council have been strong supporters and advocates for agriculture. County Executive Ball recently announced the formation of the Howard County Office of Agriculture, which is only the 3rd such county agency in the state. This new office will assist farmers across the county and educate the public about the importance of agriculture to our community. Funding from the Ag Pres program also comes to a variety of agencies that assist farmers and promote conservation and agriculture industry in Howard County. Full disclosure, the Howard Soil Conservation District does receive funds, which we use. They're critical to our ability to assist farmers with their conservation goals. In summary, there are many positive programs and opportunities for our farmers being funded through the Ag Preservation Program right now, and we would hate to see this momentum reversed by diverting the funds that support the Ag Pres program to some other use. We have a wonderful agricultural community in Howard County, but we need to explore opportunities to promote new investment and encourage new enterprises if we hope to maintain our vibrant and progressive farming atmosphere, especially if we hope to encourage the next generation of farmers and landowners to pursue the family farm lifestyle. Using this bill to divert funding away from the Ag Pres program that could be used instead to promote sustainable opportunities in the ag sector will only serve to discourage the young people that will grow our food in the future. I thank the delegation very much for the opportunity to express our concerns.
Thank you. And next up, we have Councilmember Deb Young, followed by Brian Liu, Dave McGill, and then Phil Webster. Ms. Young, please begin whenever you're ready.
Good evening. I would like to express my support for HOCO 18-24, which would create a task force to study the reallocation of transfer tax revenue. I appreciate Delegate Wu for sponsoring this bill and for pursuing a strategy for reevaluation of the current distribution of transfer tax revenue. The appointment of a task force is a prudent approach to future revenue planning. Prior to 2020, previous state legislation set a 1% transfer tax with the following distribution: 25% to the Howard County Public School System capital projects, 25% to the Department of Rec and Parks capital projects, 20% to Ag Pres, 15% to community improvement and housing programs, 15%, to the fire department capital projects. In 2020, HB 1454 authorized Howard County to increase the rate of the transfer tax above 1%, which the county did, increasing the tax to 1.25%. There's also a number of tables and more information in the written remarks that I've given to you. Since the implementation of the transfer tax, some of the designated categories now have other dedicated sources of funds, including a fire tax, housing opportunities trust fund, fee in lieu for housing programs, and interest income from agricultural land preservation. I asked the state delegation to support this bill so that a task force can review all sources of funds, existing and projected fund balances in those categories, and long-term capital improvement plans to determine future funding needs. I also request the state delegation support for this bill so that the task force can consider the benefits of aligning Howard County with neighboring jurisdictions that have more flexibility for transfer tax uses. In Montgomery, Baltimore, and Anne Arundel counties, for example, transfer tax revenue can be used in the general fund for operating or capital expenses. Prince George's County allocates the entire transfer tax revenue to certain school operating expenses. Hartford County splits the revenue equally between agricultural preservation and school construction projects. A diverse group of lobbying and advocacy groups have expressed support for redistribution of transfer tax revenue during consideration of revenue bills in the General Assembly and the County Council, as well as annual capital reports. I have included their testimonies in my written remarks. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Young. That concludes the testimony we have from witnesses speaking on local bills. At this point, I'm going to ask folks who have already testified to please exit the Zoom meeting, and you can watch the remainder of the hearing on the YouTube live stream if you are so inclined. Thank you all for being here. Next up, we have Brian Liu, who will be followed by Dave McGill, followed by Phil Webster and Samuel Yoon. And just going forward, if folks can, when you're done testifying, go ahead and leave the Zoom meeting. Welcome to catch the rest of it on the live stream, but just so we don't get too crowded with participants. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Feldmark, and also Chairman Lamb and the rest of the delegation for allowing me to speak on behalf of Atholton Adams Academy's LBI request for $150,000 in funding for an outdoor education center. Atholton Adams Academy is a private school in Columbia that offers educational opportunities to 234 students that range in age from 3 all the way through grade 12. This evening, we are seeking funding for the development of an outdoor learning space with a strong emphasis on environmental learning and sustainability. This space will provide a dynamic environment that fosters curiosity, creativity, and exploration while promoting environmental awareness and stewardship. Our 3 objectives for this are to, number 1, create an engaging and safe environment for early childhood education with a focus on environmental learning and sustainability. To also foster a love for nature and the outdoors through hands-on learning experiences related to sustainability, environmental conservation, and horticulture. We also want to support holistic child development by integrating play, learning, and nature exploration with environmentally conscious practices. With these goals in mind, we envision a comprehensive development of an outdoor learning space with environmental learning components such as sensory play areas, art and creativity zones, nature exploration areas, outdoor classrooms, rainwater harvesting systems, composting, greenhouses that align with our commitment to providing enriching and holistic learning experiences for our students. But we want this to be more than just for our students. We see this as a resource for our community, the Columbia community, Howard County as well. Outside of school hours, we also want our neighbors, community, and civic organizations to be a part of this learning experience. So we look forward to working with all of you, and we thank you for your time and also your support.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Dave McGill, followed by Phil Webster, Samuel Yoon, and then Neil Goturi.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. All right. So I'm Dave McGill. I'm the Maryland Advocacy Director for MORE. That's Mid-Atlantic Off-Road Enthusiasts. We are a mountain bike club. Our motto is riding bikes and building trails. And we build trails for everyone. We natural surface trails. We build them for equestrians, for hikers, for runners, for bird watchers, for hunters, and cyclists. The project that we are looking to fund is in Patuxent River State Park. And I'm going to hold up this map, which admittedly is a little hard to see, but basically everything on the right-hand side is in Howard County. It's along the edge of the Patuxent River. And on the left side is in Montgomery County. That's already funded. We have 4 miles of trail laid out here, which is some of the most beautiful trail that I've had the opportunity to walk in a long time. Our club builds almost 20 miles of trails a year. We maintain, we have 2,000 members. We maintain 900 miles of trails throughout the DMV area. The Patuxent River Trail Development has been going since 2014. So far, it's a 20-mile project. This is 4 miles of it. We have 7 miles that's already built. Some of you may have walked on those trails. It's extremely popular with Isaac Walton. We have support from Isaac Walton League. We have support from Trot, the equestrians. All the various groups are very supportive of this. It's a long-term project. So far, the federal government has put in $140,000 into this project, and more volunteers have contributed over 1,800 hours of volunteer work, which, depending on how you price it, is like $350,000 at least of work. We would go forward with this and develop what would be a really attractive area for local and regional people to come and ride a really beautiful trail system. Question, why is DNR not spending money on this capital? For those of you who are in the state legislature, you know that DNR is struggling just to maintain its own projects. They do have trail developers, but their trail developers basically manage grants and they manage volunteer organizations like ourselves. So the way to get the rest of this done is for us to either ultimately get an RTP grant somewhere down the line, which we will.
That's time.
We'll be at this forever, but I hope that we will see it in the legislature this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Phil Webster, followed by Samuel Yoon, Neil Goturi, then Kathy Whitney.
Good evening, Chair Feldmark and members of the Howard County delegation. Mary Rogers and I are co-leads the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia's Climate Crisis Team, and we're urging each of you to actively support the Better Buildings Act. You've probably been hearing a lot about this from other Howard County residents, and some of you have already agreed to co-sponsor this bill when it is introduced. We ask that each of you co-sponsor and give some momentum to this very important bill. Doug Siglin, one of my colleagues, has submitted testimony for this bill that clearly articulates the reasons to support the bill. Unfortunately, Doug could not be here tonight. We enthusiastically recommend that you give his testimony a very careful review. However, there are a few additional points we would like to make. Construction of buildings with fossil fuel combustion implies a build-out of methane gas infrastructure, an infrastructure that has a lifetime of greater than 50 years. However, the Climate Solutions Now Act requires that Maryland be net zero by 2045, a mere 21 years from now. The utilities are, in essence, building a highway to nowhere, the cost of which will be passed on to ratepayers. The number of ratepayers will decline as decarbonization continues. Paradoxically, it is anticipated that low and moderate income households will become an increasingly larger portion of those still using methane gas, and they will bear the cost of this stranded infrastructure. I have no doubt that the members of the Howard County delegation understand the impact of climate change will have on future Marylanders, our children, grandchildren, and their descendants in the generations to follow. Direct use of natural gas, heating oil, and propane in buildings accounted for 13% of Maryland's greenhouse gas emissions in 2017. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Act plan calls for reduction of emissions from buildings. In 2021, the Maryland Commission on Climate made new building electrification its top recommendation. Each new building with fossil fuel combustion will emit greenhouse gases for the duration of the original appliances at the very least. Each of these buildings represents a lost opportunity for greenhouse gas reduction, essentially digging the hole that we're in deeper, making it more likely to miss the greenhouse reduction targets which are legally mandated. State law requires the Public Service Commission to supervise and regulate the gas utilities to make sure they operate in the public interest. Clearly, meeting the greenhouse gas production mandates is in the public interest. It is becoming increasingly obvious the utilities are not serving the public interest, rather they are serving their shareholders. We're asking you please to actively support this bill. It is a critical part of addressing climate change now for future Marylanders. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Samuel Yoon, followed by Neil Gotori, then Kathy Whitney, and Anamita Kohli.
Good evening, members of the delegation. My name is Samuel Yoon, and I am a junior at Glenelg High School, and I am here today representing the student voices of Howard County who will inherit the buildings shaped by the Better Buildings Act. We ask that you support this legislation as Maryland is well placed to benefit from a building electrification bill. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, in 2017, Maryland single-family homes could save 30% in energy usage, which is the second highest in the nation. According to them, the most effective way to save money on utilities is by using high-efficiency heat pumps. While they are more expensive than gas furnaces initially, they pay back in less than 5 years on average and do not emit harmful pollutants that endanger the health of individuals and the environment. Seizing this opportunity would benefit HCPSS students who can faithfully expect learning spaces with unpredictable temperatures. It makes focusing challenging because many of us become more sluggish and sleepy. An improved HVAC system based on heat pumps would resolve these issues. Not only do students have an improved learning experience, but the school system would save hundreds of dollars in maintenance. By supporting this bill today, we are investing in our health, financial stability, and environmental health. We're investing in clean, low maintenance, and efficient homes powered by heat pumps. I urge you to embrace this opportunity and build a brighter future for every generation to come. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Neil Gotori, followed by Kathy Whitney, Anumita Kohli, and then Jack Hardman.
Right. Thank you. I'll start the testimony now. So, dear Chair Lamb, dear Chair Feldmark, and the members of the Howard County delegation, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Neil Gotori. I'm a junior at River Hill High School, and I'm a resident of District 9A. I'm here in support of the Better Buildings Act. The Better Buildings Act is poised to come out of legislative services very soon, and it promotes energy efficiency, electrifies new buildings, and requires new buildings to be capable of electric vehicle chargers and solar panels after construction. Howard County has been a trailblazer in climate initiatives, particularly in progressive energy policy. I was the lead student organizer for Council Bill 5, the Clean New Buildings Climate Act, passed last March. I gathered more than 150 students to sign on to a petition in support of the bill. More than 20 wrote personal letters to the county council, and over 15 gave in-person testimony to the county council. Student action and the subsequent passage of CB5 demonstrated Howard County's collective commitment to transitioning future homes and buildings towards more sustainable models of development. The Better Buildings Act is the natural evolution of this vision for the state. It promotes healthier and more cost-effective structures that significantly address the climate crisis. Thus, it should be no surprise that in just a few days, I've gathered over 350 students from all across the state of Maryland that have signed a petition in support of the Better Buildings Act. Maryland's obligation to achieve net zero carbon pollution emissions within 21 years necessitates substantial progress on both the demand and supply sides. The Better Buildings Act plays a pivotal role on the supply side, ensuring that new buildings prioritize energy conservation and eschew fossil fuels. This aligns with the General Assembly's intent for broader electrification in both existing and new constructions, as heightened by the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. The Act's cost effectiveness is particularly relevant considering the state's budget constraints right now. It provides a pragmatic solution to address long-term climate and public health challenges without imposing significant financial burdens on stakeholders. With federal subsidies available for developers embracing high-efficiency buildings, EV infrastructure, and solar installations, the Better Buildings Act aligns not only with environmental goals, but with fiscal responsibility. In conclusion, the Better Buildings Act is not just a good policy, it represents a pivotal step towards a sustainable future. I, along with many of my peers, want to inherit this bill. I am 16 years old. I have no ability to vote. This is my sole method of advocacy. I am urging you not only to co-sponsor this legislation, but to actively work toward this passage in April. This is a unique opportunity to demonstrate commitment to a greener future and set a precedent for responsible, forward-thinking governance. Again, I'd like to emphasize, this is a policy that my generation will inherit. We are building new buildings, new homes, and new office buildings to accommodate my workforce and my generation. And again, as we are unable to vote, we hope that you will keep us in mind when you act on this bill. Thank you again.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kathy Whitney, followed by Anamita Coley, followed by Jack Hardman and Ruth White.
One second. Okay. Hi, my name is Kathy Whitney, and I'm a student at River Hill High School. I'm speaking today to advocate for the Better Buildings Act. The Better Buildings Act is a legislation being considered by the Maryland General Assembly this year. So in summary, the Better Buildings Act promotes energy efficiency, electrifies new buildings in Maryland, and requires new buildings to be capable of supporting electrical vehicle chargers and solar panels after construction. So climate change, as we know, is a pressing global concern that demands immediate attention due to its far-reaching consequences. Changes such as rising temperatures, sea levels, extreme weather events, and more are posing a threat to biodiversity and overall planet well-being. This disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities demonstrates social and economic inequalities. So addressing this topic is crucial to keeping the planet's habitability safe because it ensures sustainability resource use. The Better Buildings Act is a critical legislative effort to save energy, reduce climate pollution, and quit making our climate, health, and economic problems worse while we work existing buildings through Empower reform and the retrofit subsidies suggested in the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. If the bill doesn't pass, fossil systems installed in coming years will continue to spew climate pollution past the state's statutory deadline for carbon neutrality or will have to be replaced later. Much of the bill language is drawn from the 2021 and 2022 Climate Solutions Now Act, as well as from the pending 2024 edition of the International Energy Conservation Code. Maryland Climate Commission made this a top recommendation in 2021, but that in 2022, electrification language was pulled out of the Climate Solutions Now Act in the Senate in favor of a PSC capacity study. So that PSC capacity study has been done, and it shows that new building electrification is technically feasible and would not create undue burden on our state's power grid. Delegation, I'm requesting that you co-sponsor or support the legislation in Maryland General Assembly. My fellow students share this sentiment. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anamita Coley, Jack Hardman, Ruth White, and then Liz Fainer. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Anamita Coley, and I'm an 11th grader at Glenelg High School. I would like to start by thanking the delegation for this opportunity to speak on the Better Buildings Act of 2024. I support this bill, which is not only important to meeting Maryland's net zero emissions goal by 2045, but also to the health of our community. Steps to electrification are underway in other counties and states across the U.S., and Maryland can be a part of the solution. A study presented by the Maryland Public Service Commission reveals the benefits of electrification as a way to meet Maryland's future climate goals. This study modeled electrification scenarios and estimated a reduction of 31 to 32% in fossil fuel consumption for space and water heating in buildings for each scenario. Based on previous growth in capacity, the study also shows that the slight increase in load growth caused by the high electrification or rapid electrification scenario is manageable for Maryland, demonstrating Maryland's ability to take on the electrification of new buildings. In regards to cost, states like California, New Jersey, Washington, and Oregon have all commissioned studies to find the lowest cost scenario for meeting their energy goals. They researched various ones and their long-term effects. These states all came to the same conclusion. Electrifying their buildings was the most cost-effective way to meet their energy goals. New Jersey's Energy Master Plan concluded that electrification reduces annual energy costs by 50% by 2050, compared to retaining gas use in buildings. Although these states' costs may differ from Maryland's, New Jersey has a similar climate and energy rates to that of Maryland and has concluded that electrification is one of the best ways to reach their emission goals. In addition to new building electrification, the Better Buildings Act of 2024 supports the use of solar energy, electric vehicle charging stations, and better air quality. The time to help our environment and community is now. I urge the delegation to support the Better Buildings Act of 2024, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up we have Jack Hardman, followed by Ruth White, then Liz Fainer, followed by Monica O'Connor.
Good evening. My name is Jack Hardman, and I'm a student at River Hill High School, and I'm speaking before you to advocate for the Better Buildings Act. The Better Buildings Act is legislation being considered by the Maryland General Assembly this year. In summary, the Better Buildings Act promotes energy efficiency, electrifies new buildings in Maryland, and requires new buildings to be capable of supporting electric vehicle chargers and solar panels after construction. A cornerstone of my education through the Howard County Public School System has been about the climate crisis and how it will affect our communities now and in the future. By speaking here today, I am taking action on this pressing issue to our community, and I'm hoping that you will do the same. Fossil fuel systems currently in our buildings emit more than 3 times the health-harming oxides and emit a range of harmful pollutants that can cause a child growing up in that environment to be 42% more likely to develop asthma symptoms. So not only are these systems hazardous to the environment, but also to one of our most vulnerable population groups. By supporting the Better Buildings Act, you can ensure that going forward, all units will be built with heat pumps powered by safe, renewable energy, while also providing routes for people to transition away from fossil fuels by laying the groundwork for more EV charging stations and solar panels. Following a PSC capacity study, it was found that new building electrification is feasible and will not create any undue burdens on the state's power grid. So given that the old systems are harmful and the new systems are safe, affordable, and work within our existing grids, it seems like this is a common sense action that can be taken to decrease our emissions, improve our quality of life, and all while ensuring that kids like me grow up happier, healthier, and smarter. Your support on this legislation would ensure that my fellow students and I will inherit a healthier community and a greener world. Delegation, I am requesting that you co-sponsor or support the Better Buildings Act in the Maryland General Assembly. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ruth White, and she will be followed by Liz Fainer, then Monica O'Connor, followed by Hannah Zuberi. Ms. White, you can go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify for the Better Buildings Act. It's awesome following these students who have said so much. I am also supporting some related bills, the Empower Reform Act with Senator Feldman and Delegate Crosby sponsorship. That will be introduced soon also. And the STRIDE Reform Ratepayer Protection Act, which would help transform neighborhoods to network the STRIDE Act, which will stop the unnecessary expansion of the gas infrastructure, and has been advocated for several years by the Office of People's Counsel and climate advocates. It would limit expansion to necessary fixes in the system. The Warmth Act, which by Delegate Charkoudian, which will create network geothermal pilots to show the feasibility of converting whole neighborhoods to network geothermal electricity. And the Utility Transparency and Accountability Act also would set limits on utilities' use of taxpayer money to advocate for gas expansion and increased disclosure. As I think Phil said, it's important that we advocate for ratepayers, people contributing to this, rather than just letting the utilities continue their gas expansion, which they seem committed to. Why are we focusing on buildings? Because the biggest causes of climate in Maryland of greenhouse gases are transportation and buildings. Others are advocating for transportation. That's not an easy area to fix, but for buildings, buildings are powered by electricity, and in the case of about half, a little less than half of the buildings in Maryland, by methane gas and other gas derivatives like propane. We are greening the grid, the electrical grid. We are expanding solar and wind over time, and that will happen. But there's no way, as the students have said, to stop the emissions from buildings powered by gas. They need to be switched to electricity. Methane, the International Energy Agency and the IPCC and all of the climate activists around the world have been focusing for the last few years on reducing methane gas. So there are other greenhouse gases like those caused by cars, but methane is the fastest way. Reducing methane, which is more powerful than other greenhouse gases, is the fastest way to get us to our climate goals. And that is why the whole world is focusing on electrification right now as a key fact. We need, as Phil and others have said, to stop digging the hole. It's going to be expensive to convert existing buildings, and that needs to be done. But there's no reason to burden the state and the citizens of Maryland with new buildings that we know will not meet our needs for the near future. The Empower Act will help with existing buildings. The Empower Act was established to create energy efficiency programs, and it's been very effective in doing that in terms of getting people to switch to light bulbs and funding home energy audits or subsidizing them. However, right now the utilities interpret the law to prohibit giving incentives to people to switch from gas to electric major home appliances, and that needs to change. They have fought this repeatedly, despite passage of the Climate Solutions Now Act, and we need to tell them to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, we have Liz Fainer, followed by Monica O'Connor, then Hina Zuberi, followed by Huri Hadgu.
Hi, thank you. Those students are a real tough act to follow. I'm Liz Fainer in District 13, and I'm testifying for several energy and climate bills. I'm a member of HOCO Climate Action, Less Plastics Please, and the chair of the Green Team at Emmanuel United Methodist Church in Laurel, but I'm testifying as a concerned activist about the climate emergency facing all of us. Some scientists, including former NASA climatologist James Hansen, predict global average temperatures may breach the 1.5 degrees centigrade, a widely considered crucial to avoid the most damaging impacts of climate change. Buildings are the second largest source of climate pollution in Maryland behind transportation. And as you also may know, the Howard County Council passed the Clean New Buildings Climate Act last spring, asking the county executive to recommend changes to the new building codes to require all electric buildings. This has been a high priority issue for me, and I'm urging you to co-sponsor and or actively support the Better Building Act. Passing this bill would be a significant step forward in meeting the state's aggressive climate goals, reducing residents' utility costs while providing a safer and healthier home. I am concentrating on how this bill will benefit Maryland's residents' pocketbooks. A study done in 2021 indicated that most all-electric buildings cost less to construct than buildings relying on fossil fuels. This is prior to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides significant incentives for further lowering construction costs for all new electric buildings. Additionally, households' ongoing energy costs for energy-efficient heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are substantially less than fossil fuel appliances. While the price of renewable energy is falling fast, the Office of People's Counsels completed a study showing that the delivered price of fossil fuels will increase up to 800% in the coming years. The PSC just approved BG&E rate increases, and the average residential electric bill will increase by $1.76, while gas bills will increase by $6.43 per month. Just to be connected to gas, a residential household will pay over $200 a year and climbing. That doesn't even include the cost of gas. Households and businesses should be protected from the skyrocketing fossil fuel costs by constructing all electric buildings. New fossil fuel equipment installed in the next few years will continue to cost residents and emit greenhouse gases for decades to come. While the Inflation Reduction Act provides incentive for efficient appliances like heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, the current Maryland Empower program does not if a resident is replacing a gas appliance. The Maryland Empower program needs to be reformed so that existing homes can receive incentives to switch from fossil fuel equipment to a high energy efficient electrical equipment. The Empower Maryland Energy Efficiency Act will fix this issue and other issues such as expanding access to the energy efficient incentives for low-income households. The current STRIDE Act, or the current STRIDE program, also incentivizes utilities to invest in gas infrastructure for supposedly safety and reliability. The way the current STRIDE program is structured, it incentivizes utility to replace pipes, which is much more expensive and costly to ratepayers than repairing them. Please support the STRIDE Ratepayer Protection Act. And ratepayers also pay for activities by utilities such as political spending, via campaign contributions, lobbying officials on legislation, advertising, public relations, and paying dues to entities like the American Gas Association. Much of these are not in the ratepayers' interest and not in line with the state policy goals. Please support the Utility Transparency and Accountability Act which will more clearly define lobbying and how utilities companies can use ratepayer money, closing loopholes that are being exploited by utilities companies. And I have 16 seconds left, so I want to also say, please support the Renew Rex. And I'm also with Less Plastics, Please, and will be submitting testimony in support of zero waste bills, the Maryland beverage container recycling, refund and litter reduction, synthetic turfs, playground, post-plastic consumer, and paint and mattress.
That's time. We have lost Monica O'Connor. If she's watching, if she joins back in, we can put her in at the end. So I've let in the next participant.
Okay, thank you. Then Hannah Zuberi, please go ahead when you're ready to begin.
Good evening. Good evening, Howard County delegation. My name is Hannah Zuberi. I'm a HOCO resident and the Director of Advocacy at Justice for All, a human rights organization committed to genocide prevention for over 30 years. I'm testifying in support of HJ0002, the ceasefire resolution. Ceasefire means peace. Ceasefires means stop killing children. It means return all hostages, all prisoners. It means food and water for millions. People in Gaza are eating grass. For more than a decade, I have dedicated myself to genocide research and advocating for survivors. This extensive experience has deepened my understanding of the complexities and profound impacts of these atrocities. And it's from this informed perspective that I address you. The situation in Gaza, which I do not hesitate to describe as genocidal, has direct repercussions in the US, challenging our very principles of freedom and justice. Numerous American legal organizations have documented incidents where Americans' First Amendment rights are under threat due to their stance on Palestine, including right here in Maryland. Furthermore, the crisis has significantly escalated Islamophobia in our own state. The Council on American Islamic Relations has reported a sharp increase in incidents of Islamophobia in Maryland. This is a Maryland issue. There's precedent for such resolutions, such as the Ukraine resolution, which lit up Annapolis in blue and yellow in solidarity. We too are hurting. We too belong to Howard County, to Maryland. This validates the grief and sorrow of so many and gives hope in this terrible time, including to my friend Layla, who has lost many, many family members in Gaza. This is a Maryland issue because Lockheed Martin is headquartered in Maryland and supplies bombs that I document on a daily basis. I spend my day cataloging videos and photos of over 10,000 children killed by these bombs. We stand in solidarity with all victims of violence and oppression. We implore you to use your influence to advocate for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Nelson Mandela once said, "To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity." Today, we witness a tragedy unfolding in Gaza, a tragedy where families are being demolished. So many families have been annihilated. And many of those relatives live right here in Maryland. I truly believe that one day Palestine will be free, this genocide will end, and when history looks back at this genocide, let it be known that Maryland stood on the right side, the side of humanity, justice, and peace.
Thank you. Next up, we'll hear from Huri Hadgu, followed by Serap Devaz, followed by Warda Attar.
Good evening, everybody. Huri Hadgu. I'm with a group called Howard County for Free Palestine. I'm testifying in support of House Joint Resolution 2, a resolution which calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. For nearly 4 months, I've watched with shock and horror at our community's lack of collective response as apartheid Israel brings down death and destruction on the people of Gaza using our taxpayer dollars. I've watched as American lawmakers, both Democrats and Republicans, respond with unequivocal support of apartheid Israel as this genocide unfolds. Just yesterday, Nancy Pelosi angrily responded to anti-war protesters and suggested they go back to China. Americans who attend campaign rallies are being profiled at the doors based on their appearance. Genocide and slaughter of innocent civilians is nothing new. Just 2 years ago, we witnessed as the Eritrean and Ethiopian government slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people in Tigray. Americans and our community were completely silent. Our community also remains silent as genocide unfolds in Sudan and Congo. The difference between those instances and the crimes against humanity by apartheid Israel, of course, is the scale and publicity of the slaughter. Every day we see mutilated bodies of little babies. We see mothers crying with excruciating pain as they hold and kiss their children before they cover them with shrouds. Imagine you're a mother or a father whose house was bombed by apartheid Israel. Your child has been murdered. You're now displaced at a refugee camp, far away from your home. Because apartheid Israel desecrates graves, you're not sure that if you bury your child, the grave will be there when you return. So you carry your baby's corpse to your destination. Imagine you, a father, your infant baby has been slaughtered by apartheid Israel. You carry this baby on a crate of your bicycle to a burial site to bury it alone. How can anyone with children of their own, who looks at their precious eyes every day, who treasures them more than life itself, witness this unimaginable loss and grief of mothers and fathers and be silent? How can one witness a child get orphaned and not feel sorrow for that child, because that child could be anyone's child? And after having felt this sorrow, how can anyone stay silent? Does anyone think that we as a community come out of this state of abject moral failure in one piece? I don't think so. This resolution, HJ2, is an opportunity to start this healing process. More needs to be done, of course. I think, apartheid Israel needs to be labeled as an apartheid state. We need to stop funding this genocidal campaign, and we need to collectively speak out against what is going on. So I urge the state delegates and the state senators to please support this resolution. It's the bare minimum that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarab Vaz, I did not see him or her on the list, so we're moving on to the next.
Okay. Then next up we have Warda Attar, followed by Mohammed Amin Shahata, followed by Yasmin Abu Sayed.
Good evening, delegates. My name is Dr. Warda Attar, and I'm a physician practicing here in Columbia, Maryland. I'm here to speak today in support of HJ0002. So I completed my medical training here at the Johns Hopkins Hospital just last summer. I took care of some of the sickest patients that you can imagine. I took care of people who suffered from opioid use disorder, who had lived on the streets of Baltimore for decades, who had never been under a roof. I took care of patients in the ICUs during COVID. I worked 30+ hour shifts without sleeping, without eating, wearing a respirator, and literally not leaving the COVID unit once in the height of Omicron, in the height of early COVID days. I've raced to save dozens of children who were suffering from gunshot wounds to the head. I remember one patient in particular who died while my hand was in her chest cavity while I was pumping her heart for her. And I can tell you without a doubt that what's happening right now in the Gaza Strip is 1,000 times worse than anything that I have witnessed, or anything that really anyone in this country has witnessed in a hospital in the United States. This catastrophe is unparalleled, incomprehensible, and it is fully preventable. There are currently 0 functioning hospitals in all of Gaza. There are 5 ambulances operating for a population of over 2 million people. For context, Baltimore alone has over 25 ambulances. Over 350 healthcare workers, including physicians and nurses, have been murdered. Physicians have received death threats that you can find online, they're receiving calls from Israeli intelligence agents on a daily basis, telling the doctors to leave the Gaza Strip, but that their entire families will be targeted. I read a harrowing account published by Doctors Without Borders about a woman who was forced to give birth in a latrine, surrounded by feces. Her husband was killed in an airstrike. She had no remaining family. and she gave birth in a latrine. Her newborn son died, of course, from sepsis, an overwhelming infection that could have been treated with a $5 antibiotic that's available on any street in this country. Of all those kids who will survive, there will be an entire generation of children who are growing up, over 300,000 children under the age of 5, who will grow up with PTSD. Some people say that children in Gaza don't even have the luxury of PTSD because there's no post. The trauma never stops. So it's just constant traumatic stress disorder. So these numbers are all conservative estimates. They've all been repeatedly confirmed by the United Nations, by Doctors Without Borders, and an Israeli-run organization called B'Tselem. So I'll leave you with this. There was a recent video circulating on social media. It depicted in excruciatingly graphic detail a surgeon amputating his own daughter's shrapnel-laden foot in his kitchen while she was laying there, numb from the agony, moaning. She couldn't even have the energy to get out proper screams. There's another video of a young girl.
That's time.
I'll just say this. I'm just gonna say, we don't have money. I have patients who are losing their feet. They're being amputated because they don't have insulin. We don't have money for our own patients here in Maryland, so we can't afford to be sending our tax dollars to a foreign nation that's using it to kill civilians. All that money can go to work here in our own state, and that's why this matters to you, and it's not just a foreign policy issue at the national level. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mohammed Amin Shahata, who will be followed by Yasmin Abu Sayed, followed by Sabine Sheikh.
So, okay, good evening. A very good evening to all. So this past semester, I've been a student at a institution, an academic institution, institution of higher education, specifically tertiary education. And when the administration was approached about releasing a statement denouncing or decrying the indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians, 30,000 now, the number stands, 70% women and children. The response was essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that both sides, both parties will lambaste us or criticize us in one way or another. And our statement won't sit well with either one. So whichever statement we put out, it will be criticized by one party or the other for not being to their liking. And I tried to convey to them that the goal here is not to placate one party or the other. You have the pro-genocide party, which wants to see a continuation of this war, and then you have a ceasefire party or camp that wants to see a cessation of hostilities now, and sparing further innocent civilian life. So the goal is moral uprightness here. An institution cannot be neutral or be on the fence, or worse yet, be silent. Silence on this matter is actually complicity. There's a famous statement by the grandson of the Holy Prophet of Islam. His name is Hussein, peace be upon him. He said, "Those who are silent when others are oppressed are actually guilty of oppression themselves." The oppressor is relying on the lack of criticism and the lack of backlash that they're receiving it emboldens them, and it allows them to continue and perpetuate what they're doing. Hence, even the great Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So you see, the Palestinians are currently being slaughtered, and the world. This is their response. The response of the so-called international community is essentially to greenlight and to cheerlead what Israel is doing, supplying them with munitions further and further. And despite the ICJ coming out and saying there are indications here that this is a genocide, and there's plausible evidence that this is ethnic cleansing. So, what's to say tomorrow if another group is being massacred, that the response will be lukewarm as it is currently?
That's time.
So thank you all for your attentive listening. And we hope that you stand on the right side of history, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Yasmin Abu Sayed, followed by Sabine Sheikh, followed by Kathleen Wee.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Yasmin Abu Sayed. I'm a resident of Ellicott City. I want to thank the Howard County delegation for allowing us to testify tonight in support of HJ 0002 or the ceasefire resolution. Those of us asking you to support this resolution today are not asking you to take a political or partisan stance. This is a humanitarian stance that is nonpartisan and should frankly have massive support on both sides of the aisle. The reason being that calls for ceasefire are growing internationally and across this country. By supporting this resolution, you are in fact reflecting the will of the people of the state of Maryland. Polling from December 5th, over a month ago, tells us that 61% of likely voters, including a majority of Democrats, 76%, 57% of independents, and 49% of Republicans support the U.S. calling for a permanent ceasefire and a de-escalation of violence in Gaza. From a poll of 1,000 Americans conducted on January 4th and 5th by the American Arab Institute and the Rainbow Push Coalition, likely voters are substantially more likely to back candidates for Congress if they know those candidates favor de-escalation. Respondents also indicated that they are more inclined to support a member of Congress who supports a ceasefire and that they are less willing to support members of Congress who oppose calls for a ceasefire. Recently, 1,000 Black faith leaders joined an effort and signed onto a letter calling for Biden to call for a ceasefire. The Pope has called for a ceasefire. On December 1st, the United Auto Workers Union, one of the largest unions in the country, released a statement calling for a ceasefire. Other unions that have also called for ceasefire include the United Electrical Workers, American Postal Workers Union, the Service Employees International Union, which is the second largest public service employees union in the country, and today, the American Federation of Teachers joined the call for a ceasefire. As we near the end of the fourth month of this violence, more and more Americans support a ceasefire, and the one group in this country that lags behind is lawmakers. Over 60 members of Congress have called for a ceasefire, which is a very poor percentage considering our Congress. But that includes our very own United States Senator Chris Van Hollen. He has called for a ceasefire, and Maryland, as a state, should lead the country and present a unified front to choose peace and life by supporting a ceasefire. I'll give you an example recently here in Howard County. My son attends Atholton High School, and he was one of the organizers of a ceasefire walkout they held in the first week of November. They wrote a letter to their Congress people, and they had 400 students out of a student body of 1,600 sign on. That's 25% of the student body supported a ceasefire, and that was the first week of November. Since then, my son was doxxed by adults here in Howard County on Facebook groups who were calling for identification of the students who called for a ceasefire. This has become a polarizing issue, and it really shouldn't be. So what are we waiting for? Every day, 247 Palestinians are being killed in Gaza. That's one every 6 minutes. That's 2 mothers every hour, 48 a day. The last sentence I have, I just want to make this relevant to Maryland. There are 6.18 million Marylanders. If you extrapolated the number of deaths in Gaza to the Maryland population, that's over 84,000 Marylanders killed in less than 4 months. So the time is now to call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sabine Sheikh, followed by Kathleen Wee, followed by Zubia Chowdhury, and Khalid Buthawala.
Good evening. I'm here to testify in support of Resolution HJ0002. My name is Sabine. I'm a resident of Howard County. I'm also a lecturer at the University of Maryland. I'd like to begin my testimony by having you picture the devastation that is unfolding in Gaza at this very moment. And the reason I'm able to say that it's happening at this moment is because for the first time in history, a genocide is literally being live streamed and posted on social media for all of us to see. Respect for an individual may be a learned behavior, and as an educator, I can understand that. But as human beings, we all need to understand that the value of life and the freedom to exist is not something we need to learn. It does not require education. And honestly, it's sad that it requires testimony. Think back to a time when you've seen a military person in their uniform. You may look at them with respect. You may even thank them for their service. Now picture an Israeli soldier. He's wearing a t-shirt with a Palestinian woman on it, and in the image she's pregnant. And underneath the image, there's text that says, 1 shot, 2 kills. This is what's happening in Israel. This is genocide. This is a war crime. And this is why we need a ceasefire now. I've been asked to show leniency to Jewish students when they want to participate in pro-Israel protests or anything supporting Israel, but I have not heard of showing any leniency to students that want to participate in any pro-Palestinian protests or walkouts. The one-sided nature of this political dispute is disheartening, to say the least. The lack of acknowledgement for the genocide, the constant dehumanization of the Palestinian people prohibits me from feeling as though I'm a part of an educated society here in Howard County and in Maryland. The U.S. funding and supporting this genocide actively needs to be stopped, and so calling for a ceasefire is imperative. Hate crimes are also on the rise in Maryland, and this is because of the blind support the American government is giving to this genocide. The Islamophobic tropes that may be further perpetuated by the state of Maryland if it doesn't adopt a resolution is putting all of our community in danger. The state of Maryland must call for a ceasefire now. We all stand to be victims of hate if humanity is not paramount. Due to the horrific, intense, and hateful war crimes that have now continued for 115 days, will only cease if we acknowledge humanity and call for a ceasefire. I implore the state to act locally, but think globally. As James Baldwin said, you think you're in pain and you have heartbreak, and they're unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. But today, you just have to look. You just have to open your phone and you see it. So you can literally watch it. For humanity's sake, please let's normalize changing our opinion on something after learning, after watching it. Take that information, take that knowledge, and be a part of the change that you want to see. Be a part of this don't be a part of this genocide. Call for a ceasefire. Seek to understand why life is valuable and why humanity is important. Please call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kathleen Wee, followed by Zubia Chowdhury, Khalid Puthawala, and Hilda Jacobson. You're still on mute.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Wee. I'm a resident of Columbia, Maryland, and I'm here to testify in support of HJ2. I first want to thank the delegates who have sponsored this bill, Delegates Acevedo, Martinez, Alston, Fennell, Robertson, Sample, Hughes, Turner, and Young. I'm greatly concerned about the ongoing situation in Gaza and the broader implications it has on our values and principles, especially regarding human rights and freedom of expression. I believe it's crucial for leadership in Maryland to take a stance on these issues. We must condemn the violations of international law, including the attack on October 7th by Hamas and the Israeli military response, which was to bomb the 2.3 million Palestinian people living in Gaza. This is not just about international affairs, it's about where we as a state stand when it comes to witnessing and responding to acts of violence and potential atrocities. I feel it's imperative to understand the use of our taxpayer dollars, particularly concerning their potential links to such situations. As of now, this armed violence has claimed over 23,000 Palestinians, more than 10,000 of them being children. When will we stand up to say enough is enough? We need an immediate permanent ceasefire and allow humanitarian aid immediately to the Palestinian people. As I speak, there are thousands of people right now who have no access to water or food. As I speak right now, parents are watching their children slowly dying of starvation. I ask that the Maryland delegation pass this resolution. And I want to say, I am watching you as you vote right now, and I will vote accordingly. And for me, that means delegates Jessica Feldmark and Terry Hill. I want to thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Next up, we have Zubia Chowdhury, followed by Khalid Puthawala, Hilda Jacobson, and Sami El-Zaharna.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I begin in the name of God, the most mighty and merciful. I am Dr. Zubia Chowdhury, and I practice here in Columbia and also downtown Baltimore. I'm also with a group of Baltimore healthcare workers for Palestine. I will be giving a testimony in favor of this resolution 0002 for the ceasefire in the Maryland General Assembly. And I would like to focus on my fellow healthcare workers. As we witness more than 100 days of genocide in Gaza, it is crucial that we as concerned Maryland residents and taxpayers to take a sound stand. As a physician, I have been especially concerned about the attack on hospitals and healthcare workers. I have been in touch with few physicians on the ground in Gaza, and among them is Dr. Ibrahim Matar. He works as an internist in ICU and cardiology ward in Gaza Hospital. He lived in the hospital for 4 months, not only to help his patients, but he had to take refuge in the hospital like many other civilians. He has not only been posting this dire situation in the hospital with the patients, but also emotional and physical toll it has taken on his health. Few weeks ago, his hospital was raided by Israeli forces and he was forced to leave. Now he's a refugee on the streets and still not able to see his family because there is limited movement between North and South Gaza. I have been wondering why this situation has such an impact on a lot of us. It may be because what we identify as. Part of our identity is who are we born with, and the part it is who we grow up to be. As Muslims, most of us here testifying have carried this pain of suffering of our fellow Palestinians as long as I can remember, I can read or listen to the news. As a physician, it hurts me to see my fellow healthcare workers suffer. And now, as a part of my identity as an American and a Marylander, this pain is compounded as US is backing Israeli military operation with our taxpayer money. And you may not identify as I identify myself with what I've mentioned above, but I implore you to call on your humanity to further this resolution, to call for ceasefire, and for a moment maybe it will allow us to act like human beings, and help us call an end to this senseless violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear Khalid Puthawala, followed by Hilda Jacobson, followed by Sami El-Zaharna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'd like to start by, first of all, noting that I'm neither Arab or Jewish, but really my statements here represent sort of the voice of the average citizen who's witnessing the atrocities abroad. And, you know, the fact that an ordinary citizen like myself, who really has no connection to the bloodshed that's occurring in Gaza, is speaking out is sort of a testimony to the severity of the injustice that's going on there. You know, I've grown up in the US listening for the last several decades off and on about suicide bombers and Palestinians fighting tanks with rocks and Hamas and the PLO. And, you know, all of these events over the last 40 years, we hear off and on intermittently in the news. But I think what's going on now is really a new level of oppression. And I guess I've always assumed that for every, at least in the news, from what I gather, it always seems like for every, you know, Israeli citizen who's killed, there's maybe, you know, 10 Palestinians that die on average. These are sort of the numbers that I'm used to hearing about. But really what we're looking at now is sort of a 25-fold difference. And this is not to mention the hundreds and thousands that are at risk of famine and disease. And so I really think this represents a new low for the government of Israel. And I want to be clear that my statements here, they're not anti-Semitic. I mean, statements made against a government, I think, are political statements. So, for example, if I speak out against human rights against Saudi Arabia, MBS killing journalists or the oppressive laws there, I don't get labeled as an Islamophobe per se. So I think this separation needs to be there in our terminology. And so, again, my comments here are not against any faith in particular. I think the U.S. really needs to stop sending what looks like $30+ billion to aid a country that really enjoys a high standard of living, and a country that has a number of human rights violations sort of accruing, and with impunity, really. And I think this idea could really be applied broadly to all countries in the world where U.S. tax dollars are sent, and they should not really be supporting. They should be supporting humanitarian assistance and not, anything else. I also think it's important to recall our own history, our own U.S. history. United States has a history of failed foreign policy, picking sides with former friends that turned enemies, or former allies that ended up doing the wrong thing. Separate from foreign policy, if we look at our own domestic policy, we have a history of Native American violence. We have a history of treating African Americans.
Time is up.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Hilda Jacobson, followed by Sami Elzaharna, followed by Gaita Songwe.
Hi. As a citizen and voter of Legislative District 13, I'm here today to urge you to support House Joint Resolution 2, calling for a long-term ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. Out of all the bills being heard today, this is by far the most urgent, because for each day that we don't call a ceasefire, hundreds of people in occupied Palestine are murdered. Each day without a ceasefire, our tax dollars are actively being spent on explosives and military-grade weaponry for more mass civilian death. Each day without a ceasefire, we, as citizens of both Howard County and the U.S. at large, grow more and more complicit in a genocide that we fully have the power to put an end to. As of this morning, 27,121 Palestinians have been murdered in Gaza and the occupied West Bank, 10,100 of them children. Almost 70,000 Palestinians are injured during a time where there are no longer any fully functioning hospitals left in Gaza. These numbers are completely impossible to wrap your head around, so I tried to put them in perspective locally. So from my own experience, just looking at child death alone, this equivalent would be the murder of all students throughout my personal HCPSS education at Fulton Elementary, Limekiln Middle, and River Hill High School, 3.5 times over. Imagine all 3 of your schools blown up, everyone you grew up with, every K through 12 grade gone in only 4 months. And yet I would still have to live 3.5 lifetimes to fully experience the same amount of child death. As for the total loss, this would look like a staggering 30% of the whole Howard County population killed or injured in just 4 months. The scale of devastation in Gaza is completely unimaginable because in so many ways it's just completely unparalleled. It's a real life hell on earth that's currently unfolding and also completely avoidable. As representatives of Howard County, your actions should mirror the needs of the people. And right now, Howard County citizens are overwhelmingly pleading for you to take a stand against the ongoing genocide of Palestinians. The fact that none of you, no Howard County delegate, has yet to support a ceasefire resolution is insulting to the people that you claim to represent. More than 60% of US voters want a ceasefire. Why is this not represented in our county? How can we trust that you'll act in our best interest if you can't even condemn one of the most blatant human atrocities in the modern world, let alone do everything in your power to stop it? Calling for a ceasefire is the most humanitarian and least political stance you can take on this issue, and the bare minimum. So I'm calling on the whole Howard County delegation to take action and urgently vote House Joint Resolution 2 out of committee with a favorable report. Anything short of a ceasefire resolution is passive approval of genocide and complicity, and I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Sami El-Zaharna, followed by Gaita Songwe and Sabina Kansis.
Good evening. My name is Sami Zaharna. I'm a Palestinian American from Gaza who serves as the lead imam of the Muslim Family Center here in Columbia, Maryland, a congregation of about 3,000 people. I also live here. I'm here to testify in support of HJ2, supporting a long-term ceasefire in Israel and Palestine. I speak today in my capacity as a Palestinian American from Gaza, but also in my capacity as a faith leader. Gaza is where I spent my summers as a child. It's where I learned to swim in its beautiful Mediterranean waters. It's where I learned how to cure olives. And more devastatingly, perhaps, it's where I learned that injustice is real. And it's where I witnessed as a 6-year-old, an IDF soldier of the occupying forces beat my aunt for being a few minutes late past curfew. What's happening today in Gaza is simply an extension, albeit a very dramatic one, of over 7 years of brutal settler colonial occupation and forced displacement of my native people. Over the past 115 days, my entire extended family today in Gaza has been displaced around the Gaza Strip, often jumping between homes and schools for shelter. I've had several cousins and their entire families, 3 generations, killed by Israeli airstrikes. My maternal aunt was killed. My paternal uncle died from a lack of medication and food during the past month. And according to the Undersecretary General of Humanitarian Affairs at the UN, Gaza is uninhabitable. 115 days of killing, destruction, no power, no water, no fuel, often no cell phone reception. I, along with several others, am of the opinion that our stance on what nearly every human rights organization, as others before me have already mentioned, has labeled a genocide taking place in real time, is the litmus test of whether we will be on the right side of history. History will not look back kindly, as it does not look back kindly as for those who supported the apartheid in South Africa. It will not look back kindly at our inaction for those who have been privileged with a platform and neglected their duty to speak out for what's right and what's true. In my capacity as a faith leader, I can tell you, as you've heard from many members of my congregation today, actually, my community feels very afraid, feels completely disenfranchised with the Democratic Party line on the war in Gaza. Our leaders' response at every level of government, both local here in Howard County, statewide and national, on the ongoing genocide in Gaza has had severe consequences on my congregation. As you all know, racism is a structural enterprise, and the silence on our suffering is a crime of omission that will only continue to cause the hate crimes against Muslims and Arabs to increase. We know that a permanent ceasefire is the first of many steps to achieve a long-lasting solution in the region, and we acknowledge the symbolic nature of this, but it's nevertheless a critical step to adopt this revolution and stand on the side of humanity. I ask you to support the resolution, and I also urge you to urge Chair Healy to pass it out of committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are missing the next 2 participants, Gaita Songwe and Sabina Kansis. So Ying Matties has been admitted.
Okay, so next we'll hear from Ying Matties, followed by Jenna Khan and Helena Terror.
Good evening. My name is Ying Matties. I'm a resident in District 13. I'm here tonight to urge members of this delegation to support the ceasefire resolution. I am grateful to my representative, Delegate Atterbury's commitment to vote for the ceasefire resolution, and I appreciate Delegate Hill, who is running for Congress, for opening her heart and mind to the cries of Palestinian Americans and agreeing to co-sponsor the resolution. Ever since I became a naturalized citizen 22 years ago, I voted in every single election except for one. I have been a pragmatic voter, supporting and sometimes campaigning for candidates that don't always share all of my values, but were the best of all choices, or as the saying goes, lesser of 2 evils. It is not in my nature to apply purity tests on candidates or elected officials because I recognize the imperfections in all of us. Many issues are complex, and living in a civil society requires compromises and empathy for each other. However, there is a line when so many people in positions of power stay silent as our tax dollars fund indiscriminate bombing of civilians, they have crossed that line of basic human decency. Not every issue demands moral clarity. Your response to an unfolding genocide does. Regardless of your identity, if you do not have the courage to speak up for the innocent children in Gaza because it is politically risky to do so, how can I trust you to stand firm on the right side of history on any other issue? Today is Fred Korematsu Day. History has a funny habit of repeating itself. If and when the American government decides to repeat the shameful history of Japanese internment, this time targeting Chinese Americans, it is almost guaranteed that the political climate at the time would, at least among the ruling class, would be one of bigotry towards Asian Americans. And they will make sure that anyone who dares to speak up and step out of line will be punished, just like the ruling class punishing the voices for peace and human rights for the Palestinians right now. Can I count on you to speak up and support my basic rights if that happens? I will cast my vote in the upcoming elections based on how you vote on the ceasefire resolution, and if you can speak up on behalf of the innocent children in Gaza. This is not a purity test. This is a test of your humanity. And I know I'm far from being alone in feeling this way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jenna Kahn, followed by Helena Terror and Dan Hodgdo. You can go ahead and begin when you're ready. You're muted. I'm sorry. Ms. Khan, can you unmute yourself? Ms. Doring, are you able to? It looks like she's having some trouble unmuting. Are we?
Let me try. I can maybe request her to unmute and see if she can accept that.
Thank you. That works.
Okay, great.
So
Go ahead. Thank you.
I apologize. I'm Jenna Kahn. I'm a resident of Howard County, and I'm calling in support of Resolution HJ 0002. I'm calling because it is obvious to me that genocide is happening before our eyes, and living in a diverse community with protections of our own freedom of speech and of religion, how can we sit here and not call for a ceasefire, knowing that our tax-paid money is going to the destruction of an entire people? I grew up in a country that claimed equality and justice for all, but what is happening outside of our borders with our money looks more like hatred, bias, and destruction. Mental gymnastics and propaganda performances to try and justify it. If you don't know that this is genocide by now, you have not done your homework, or you are lying to yourself and to those around you. If we don't do this, we risk losing who we are as a people. The people, the human beings and not animals of Gaza risk everything just by existing. Their existence is so offensive and so threatening that it's taking over 100 days, and still a permanent ceasefire has not been sustained. That they have not been recognized as fully human, and it is sickening. It worries me that what will happen next, and we must act now. We must stand up for what's right and not partake in or support injustice around the world. It is not who I am, and it does not represent me. We have heard so many things. We have seen so many things on the media. If you are even paying attention, the ICJ hearing is saying that genocide is plausible. Do you want to be the kind of representative that has been silent or gone against this resolution? In 10 years, 5, 10 years, 15 years, how will you feel about this? How will our society feel about this? And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Helena Terror did not appear on the list.
Okay. So Senator Lamb has been listening in for most of this evening's hearing so far, but was driving, and he is now, as you can see, joined us on camera, and I'm gonna hand it over to him to continue chairing the rest of the hearing.
All right, thank you, Chair Feldmark. We're going to proceed on with the folks who signed up on the witness list. Next, we have Dan Hajdo, followed by Jake Burdett, followed by Mohammed Abukdiyar. Raja, go ahead.
Yes, I'm Dan Hoyto. I live in Columbia, Maryland. I'm testifying in support of HJ2, calling for a ceasefire. And those who have already spoken have made the case better than I ever could. So I have one thing to add from my perspective, and it's something that Senator Lamb said in an email to constituents on January 6th this year regarding January 6th of 2020. And I didn't mean to single him out. Any one of the delegates could have said this. Senator Lamb writes that he, quote, spent the day watching the news in horror and resolved to do everything in his power to preserve democracy because, quote, the truth is bad things are often made worse when good people stand by and do nothing. I agree. I'd add more, but the point being, I, like so many others, have watched the news in horror and indeed rage for nearly 4 months now. Haven't heard anything. And so when I read that, my first thought was, really? I'm supposed to believe that? There were also statements about protecting democracy. And again, it makes me want to say, really? President Biden uses a Trump innovation to bypass Congress to rush more weapons to Israel. And there's nothing. Nothing. It makes it hard to believe. Until recently, there's been silence and inaction at best at every level of government here across the country when it comes to human rights for Palestinians. When clear violations of international law by Israel. And sure enough, since October, the truth is things have gotten worse and worse and worse in Gaza. Yet that email could be an argument for a ceasefire. It could be a hopeful sign because it's also true that there has not been silence and inaction among the people of this country, and even more so around the world. There has not been silence and action from almost every nation except for the United States. And now that the International Court of Justice has ruled that there is a plausible case for action to prevent irremediable harm, our president, our nation, is obliged to act under our own law bound by the Genocide Convention. And so now you and the state of Maryland, you delegates, have the opportunity for national leadership to join Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, South Africa, European Union, hundreds of scholars and community leaders, et cetera, to do everything you can to stop the horror of Israel's assault.
That's time.
All right, thank you. Next we have Mr. Jake Burdett, followed by Mohammed Abukdiyar, followed by Salahuddin Niemer. Mr. Burdett, go ahead.
Good evening, members of the Howard County State Delegation. My name is Jake Burdett, and I'm the co-chair of Our Revolution Howard County, as well as a member of the group Howard County for Free Palestine. I'm testifying to you all tonight in support of HJ2, which is the House ceasefire resolution introduced by Delegate Gabriel Acevero. According to various international human rights organizations, since October 7th, the state of Israel has killed over 26,000 Palestinians, including over 10,000 children and 5,000 women. All of this has been done largely with U.S. taxpayer dollars in support. Before I go on any further, I'd like to give a massive thank you to State Delegate Terry Hill for seemingly being the only state delegate in Howard County to sign on as a co-sponsor for the ceasefire resolution. Delegate Hill, your courage and leadership does not go unnoticed, and I'm thankful to be able to call you my representative. Delegate Atterbury, I've also heard that you had made a commitment to co-sponsor the ceasefire resolution, and I hope that you will follow through on that, and thank you for doing so if you do. But who I'd like to address in the rest of my testimony is the rest of the Howard County State Delegation. Those of you who, for some inexplicable reason, have been unwilling to take a simple, common sense moral stance against the indiscriminate bombing of women and children. Every day that goes by, dozens more Palestinians are killed by the state of Israel. Hospitals, schools, and other civilian infrastructure are being intentionally targeted. In fact, things are so bad that the International Court of Justice just recently ruled against Israel and South Africa's genocide case against them, in which the court found that it was absolutely plausible that the state of Israel may currently be in the middle of an ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people. So my question to you, HOCO reps who have not yet signed on to the ceasefire resolution is this. Is Howard County the county of choose civility or the county of choose genocide? This should not be a difficult question, and the fact that most of you have not chosen civility over genocide yet is quite troubling. Luckily, it is not too late for you to reverse course and still end up on the right side of history. I urge all of you to please consider joining the global moral consensus by supporting a ceasefire in Gaza. And don't let anybody try to tell you that this is just an international issue that is not within the purview of the state delegation. When Maryland public school teachers are being disciplined for speaking up for Palestine, and when Maryland public school students experience censorship during pro-ceasefire demonstrations, this is a state free speech issue. When thousands of your Muslim constituents have to experience Islamophobic hate and indifference to their community being slaughtered, this is a state issue. And when nearly $80 million of Maryland taxpayer funds go to Israel each year, this absolutely is a state issue. If we truly want to fully fund Kerwin, minimize the massive and devastating transportation budget cuts, and provide necessary funding to all Maryland's needs, we have to stop giving all our taxpayer funds to foreign governments committing crimes with money.
That's time.
That begins with a strong call for a ceasefire from you all. Thank you.
That's time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mohammed Aboudir, followed by Salahuddin Niemer, and then Noor Tibi.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Aboudir, and I'm a Muslim Palestinian American student from Howard County here to support Resolution HJ2. I never thought I'd have to argue that murdering 26,000 innocent people is worth speaking out against, and yet that's all I've been doing for the past 4 months now. The situation in Gaza is unprecedented. In no war in the 21st century have innocents died at the rates at which they are right now in Gaza. This is not the norm. That's because when people are indiscriminately murdered on the scale, we call it what it is, a genocide, and it couldn't be more urgent. Every minute we waste weighing the pros and cons of whether to speak up about Gaza, more people die. This is why I, like the vast majority of Americans, support an immediate ceasefire. And yet when I've spoken to people who allegedly represent me, my local county governments, my school board, our Human Rights Commission, and many more, there's been an astonishing lack of urgency or even sympathy for the tens of thousands of Gazans who've been slaughtered, the millions who've been starved, dehydrated, and made homeless, and let's face it, the many more who are dying now as we speak, and who will continue to die until direct action is taken. Unfortunately, I've heard the same sickening sentiment repeated over and over again, that this issue is somehow outside of our purview or too far from Maryland. And aside from the fact that this is a human issue above all else, and which should be more than enough to get every single person of conscience outraged, I'd like to point out how the Gaza genocide directly affects all of us Americans. We all saw in Rockville what I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, people waving Israeli flags, chanting slurs, and "We kill your brothers." In October, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy, Wadir al-Fayoum, was stabbed to death in his home. In November, 3 Palestinian-American students were shot for wearing their kufiyyas and speaking Arabic in public. One of them, Hisham Awartani, a Brown University student, will never walk again. On the 19th of this month, peaceful protesters at Columbia University were sprayed with skunk spray, a chemical weapon designed by the Israeli military by former Israeli soldiers on their campus. Just over a week ago, Tawfiq Ajak, a 17-year-old American citizen, was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank. I could go on and on with stories of innocent Americans killed, maimed, assaulted, harassed, and censored over the last few months alone, but it is no secret why that's the case. Any Muslim, Palestinian, or Arab can tell you that it's simple. The longer that you refuse to condemn the oppression of Palestinians, sweep their suffering under the rug, the easier it is to dehumanize all of us, including your constituents. In the words of Nelson Mandela, we know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Injustice overseas sends ripples of hate here as well, and it's your responsibility to show that it has no place here. If you care at all about preserving the safety and constitutional rights of your constituents, including those of color, those Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians who are most at risk right now, call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we will move to Salahuddin Niemer, followed by Noor Tibi, and then Amal Sinakrat.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Salahuddin Niemer. I'm a Palestinian American. I'm also asking the delegates to support HA 0002, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel is misusing our tax dollars in what the ICJ recently ruled as being plausible being a genocide. You've heard the stats, over 33,000 civilians killed or presumed dead, over half of those being children. Just imagine 200 Howard County school buses full of dead children. The devastation is unimaginable. This violence against the Palestinians, against the indigenous people of Palestine, needs to be no longer normalized. My great-grandparents were driven out of their homes in 1948 when the settler colony of Israel was formed. The continuation of this violence is supported by the U.S. with our tax dollars. We need to lead the state in calling for a ceasefire, so I hope you all will support HJ 0002. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Noor Tibi, followed by Amal Sinakrat, and then Anna Cortez.
Hi, sorry, I was just getting my toddler down. Good evening, everyone. I'm a Palestinian American living here in Howard County, and I just want to urge the state delegates to support HJ 002 and demand a permanent, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. As of January 25th, 33,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed in Gaza, and this number includes the people who are presumed dead under the rubble. That's 7,000 people who are dead under the rubble, and their families haven't been able to take them out. There are over 64,000 Palestinians in Gaza who are injured. These are including life-threatening injuries. About 10 kids are having a limb amputated every single day with little to no anesthesia. 2 moms are killed approximately every hour. There are accounts of pregnant women who are literally being run over by military vehicles. An hour ago or 2 hours ago, I heard an audio recording of a 15-year-old girl who had called the Palestinian Red Crescent for assistance, and she was killed during her call by Israelis. And you hear the gunfire and her screaming. The destruction in the past 116 days is catastrophic. All hospitals have been severely compromised. Universities, schools, roads, basically all infrastructure is completely destroyed. Last Friday, the ICJ found in a preliminary ruling that the charge of genocide against Israel is possible, and they're moving forward with the case. As Americans, myself, all of you, we are not just complicit in genocide. We are literally participants in genocide. Every year, Howard County taxpayers fund $3.3 million in weapons and military funding to Israel. And this is without any additional or supplemental funding. Our tax dollars can be used in a million other ways here in America, here in Howard County. And instead, what we're doing right now is we're literally causing carnage and literal crimes against humanity, actual war crimes. And so again, I'm urging you all to support the resolution to cease fire and take a stance for humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Amal Sinakrat, then Anna Cortez, and Musna Ansari.
Hello, my name is Amel Sinacrat, and I'm testifying in support of HJ2, a call for a ceasefire in Gaza. I am Maryland born and raised. As a Palestinian American, I spent many summers in the West Bank as a child. Both sides of my extended family live there. My husband is Palestinian, but his family was forced to flee in 1948 as refugees, and he has never been to his ancestral homeland. I have 2 children, a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old daughter. I'm also pregnant with our 3rd child. This pregnancy has been much more mentally taxing as I watch what is happening in Gaza. I have a lot of guilt that I'm receiving some of the best care in the world while women are struggling to survive in Gaza. Miscarriages have shot up to 300% due to the conditions imposed on the entire population by Israel. Women are having C-sections without anesthesia due to the fact that Israel has literally demolished the entire healthcare system in Gaza. To the parents listening, do you remember that first night after you brought home your first child from the hospital? Do you remember how exhausted you were and how you couldn't wait to take a shower and get in your bed? Do you remember checking if your baby was breathing every hour or wondering if your baby had enough to eat? Parents in Gaza are dealing with all those feelings, but without having a home or basic necessities to support their children. They are sleeping in tents or outside in the cold of the winter. Can you imagine caring for a newborn in those conditions when you yourself have literally been starved due to an imposed blockade? There's no formula, and even if by some miracle you find some, you don't have clean water. On top of all that, bombs are constantly falling all around you. This is what Israel is doing to the entire population of Gaza, whom over half are children. My daughter has a rare genetic condition and has been hospitalized twice in the last month. She cannot break down fat, so she cannot go long without eating or else she'll die. Both times she was hospitalized, I couldn't stop thinking of the children in Gaza, knowing that if my daughter had been there, she wouldn't have survived a day without food. She may not have even had living family to care for her or find food for her. As Israel has killed entire families with their indiscriminate bombing campaign, Israel is starving 2 million people on purpose. Do you realize what that means? If they don't die from the bombs or the disease, they are dying a slow death from lack of clean water, food, or aid. When you refuse to call for a ceasefire, you are damning those children to these conditions. I'm asking you to call for a ceasefire to stop the violence on both sides, to let these children have a chance to live. Israel has killed over 30,000 people, 70% being women and children. These are human beings, and we must stand up for those that are suffering in this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anna Cortez, followed by Muzna Ansari, and then Ruba Akbukir. Ms. Cortez, we cannot hear you. There we go.
Sorry. Okay. I'm sorry if you can't see me all the way, but thank you. My name is Ana Cortez. I am Mexican and don't have any family in Gaza or Palestine, but I can see what's happening, and my humanity has called me to be present and to pay attention and to speak out. I'm here to call for a ceasefire for Gaza. I'm here to remind you all that it's been almost 4 full months of the merciless, indiscriminate, horrific bombing on Gaza by Israel. The time for you to use your influence to ceasefire, to call for ceasefire, and to restore America's humanity is long overdue. I'm here to say to you, stop being afraid of the Zionist bullies in our counties, in Maryland. Stop being afraid of the bullies. We always, in America, oh, we don't want the bullies. We speak out against the bullies. You all are not speaking out against the Zionist bullies who are killing people. Israel has killed over 25,000, tens of thousands of moms, dads, granddads, grandmas, children, adolescents, young people, people in the prime of their life. This is an abomination. I never imagined I would ever see anything like this. I refuse to accept that my county, my state, my country are so easily intimidated and controlled by Zionist bullies. Call for ceasefire now. For crying out loud. People in Gaza do not have an iron dome to protect them. Displaced people in Gaza are not being kept in hotels like Israelis who lived in illegal settlements. Okay, they're not being kept in hotels. Gazans are being extremely hungry, extremely thirsty, extremely traumatized, extremely terrorized, extremely injured, extremely sick, extremely grief-stricken. Ceasefire now. Do not wash your hands. Call for ceasefire now. Would you not do the same for Americans? Would you not do the same for Jews? Would you not do the same for others? It appears to me, I've been analyzing and thinking and watching and reading. It appears to me that the existence of Palestinians seems to be a threat to Israelis. And I am terrified that Israel will want to kill every Palestinian in existence. Please call for ceasefire. It's long overdue. We are voters. We are taxpayers. We are humans. We are standing up. This is what America is supposed to do. Stand up for others. It's time to do your job. You didn't take your job to take care of your families.
That's
some
time.
people have. It's
Excuse
time
me,
to
sorry.
take care of other people. It's time to
That's time.
ceasefire. Do your job, and we are the voters.
Next, we have Muzna Ansari, followed by Ruba Akboudir, and then Faisal Siddiqui.
Hello, good evening. My name is Muzna Ansari. I'm a Howard County resident for almost 5 years now. I have dedicated my career to social justice. I have worked on voting rights, civil rights, and for the past decade, immigrant rights. I want to start by first thanking the delegates who have drafted and introduced House Joint Resolution 2, which calls for a long-term ceasefire in Palestine. The breadth and scale of human rights abuses in Gaza are truly shocking, from basic freedom of movement to access to necessities such as food and water, as you have heard this evening. I have heard the refrain from leaders in Howard County that this is an issue far away, one that we cannot change, and one that does not affect us. None of us on this call are naive enough to believe that these resolutions will end the atrocities in Gaza, but we are also smart enough to know that these resolutions are not simply symbolic in nature. They are a testament to the public opinion and a reflection of the concerns of county and state residents. And when enough states pass these resolutions, the very elected officials who have ignored us and the officials that do have the power and ability to help bring an end to the violence in Palestine will see just how out of touch they are with the will of the people. I am grateful that Senator Van Hollen has joined calls for a ceasefire, but we still have many other state electeds who are blatantly ignoring the will of the people. And the truth of the matter is that this issue does affect us directly. The Council on American Islamic Relations received 3,578 complaints during the last 3 months alone. There have been countless incidents right here in Howard County of students whose freedom of speech has been inhibited simply because they are speaking on behalf of Palestine. Across the nation, there have been attempts not only to prevent our communities from speaking out and exercising our freedom of speech, but elected leaders have gone so far as to smear us and defame us for exercising these rights. As the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, recently stated, it is never okay for our leaders to attack, investigate, or surveil people because of their dissent against the government, period. In our own state, the Montgomery County Senate delegation went after immigrant rights organization simply because they expressed support for Palestine. Today, we are being prevented from speaking out on behalf of our communities and against a genocide. Tomorrow, we may be inhibited from exercising our freedom of speech on other matters. This is a dangerous and slippery slope, not just for us as residents of Maryland, but for us as citizens of a democracy. The issue of Palestine is not a small or irrelevant one, but one that affects all of us directly. And frankly, many of us here tonight in the community are single issue voters. Your votes on this resolution will determine whether or not we will support you in the next election cycle. I call on you to support Resolution HJ002. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ruba Akboudir, followed by Faisal Siddiqui, who is our last speaker.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ruba Abu Khair, and I am a resident of Columbia, Howard County. Let me paint a picture for you. It comes through the eyes of a 25-year-old filmmaker and journalist in Gaza, Bissam Aouda. Bissam wrote the following on her Instagram page today. In the north of Gaza Strip, dozens of bodies of Palestinian citizens were found, handcuffed, blindfolded, and murdered, while their bodies were dumped in the garbage. In the south of Gaza Strip, a 7-year-old girl named Layan has been surrounded by occupation snipers since yesterday in a car with 6 members of her family who were all killed by the snipers. Well, we know that she is alive and besieged because she spoke to the Red Crescent ambulance and asked for their help, but the Israeli army prevents them from reaching the girl. Bissam's Instagram story is not exaggerated, and sadly, it's not unique. To date, over 27,000 people have been confirmed to be murdered, which does not account for people buried alive under the remains of their homes. The irony is that many of those who survived consider those who were murdered by the Israeli occupation forces as the lucky ones because of the dire conditions they are living under. Pregnant women are having C-sections without anesthesia. New mothers are having to use salt water from the sea for baby formula, and children are losing limbs and parents as a result of this genocide. We watch Israeli occupation forces celebrate the destruction of another apartment building, another school, another neighborhood. And for some reason, the murderers have managed to dupe some into thinking they are actually rescuing the Palestinians, when in fact they are enticed like mice into a trap and murdered for sport by the Israeli occupation forces, to quote American journalist Christopher Hedges. I'm an immigrant to the US who was raised by displaced Palestinian parents in Jordan. I have always teased my friends in Jordan by bragging about being in the land of First Amendment rights. Well, now tables have turned, and they just about my so-called freedoms. Overnight, the definition of ceasefire were rewritten, and suddenly some claim to associate it with bigotry. If I were Ukrainian and speaking before you, there would be no question that the violence has to stop. To quote James Elder, the UNICEF global spokesperson, he said, "I was in Ukraine when families just like these were forced to flee and the world opened its heart to them. I do not understand now why the world closed its eyes." Unfortunately, we have to try harder because we are Palestinians. But make no mistake, we will never forget people who chose comfort and silence over demanding a ceasefire. Please support HJ002. Please support the ceasefire resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I misspoke earlier. We actually had 2 others that joined. We have, in addition to the next person, who's Faisal Siddiqui, we also have Corinne Happel, followed by Monica O'Connor, and that's the end of the witnesses. We have Faisal Siddiqui on. Does not look like it. Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
They were here.
I think you're, Mr.
I'm gonna
Siddiqui,
ask to
you're
unmute.
muted.
Okay, let me
Yeah,
see.
there we go.
I have to ask them to do.
Good evening. My name is Faisal Siddiqui. I'm a native Howard Countyan, born, raised, and educated in Maryland. And I'm here to testify in my personal capacity in support of HJ2, the ceasefire resolution. I'm a proud Marylander, and I'm proud of the environment in which I grew up and the values upon which I was raised. I grew up with fellow students, co-workers, best friends who were Jewish, Japanese American, Black, white, disabled, from every type of background. And I was inculcated with the values that we hold dear in Howard County and in Maryland. Appreciating diversity, abhorring discrimination, such as anti-Semitism, respecting the rule of law, and standing up for what is right. I ask you to support HJ2 because this resolution is about standing up for those values. The IDF's actions in Palestine are about discrimination. Innocent people are being killed, according to Oxfam, at a daily death rate higher than any other major 21st century conflict because of their race, because they are Palestinian. This is not my personal interpretation. This is what many Israeli politicians have made clear. For example, on November 12th, Israeli Agricultural Minister Avi Dichter said that they were, quote unquote, rolling out a Nakba, or ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. On January 2nd, the US State Department issued a statement rejecting statements by the Israeli Minister of Finance and the Israeli Minister of National Security advocating for the resettlement of Palestinians outside of Gaza. On January 3rd, the Israeli ambassador to the UK said on news that every school, mosque, and second house is a target for Israel. And as reported by CNN, the Times of Israel, and several other publications, there have been numerous videos on social media showing IDF soldiers humiliating, degrading, and mocking Palestinians, not Hamas, Palestinians. The result of such a discriminatory attitude has resulted in the indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinians, a majority of whom are women and children. Churches, hospitals, universities have been targeted. Children are being amputated without anesthesia. They've been denied food, water, electricity. Palestinians are starving and freezing in the winter. We wouldn't tolerate this type of discriminatory attitude based on race if it happened in Howard County. We shouldn't tolerate it elsewhere, and we shouldn't tolerate it with our tax dollars. I'd like to make one last point, and that's that those that are advocating for the continued violence against Palestinians would like you to believe that all Israelis or all Jews support the IDF's continued operation, and that's simply not true. Many of our Jewish brothers and sisters in Israel, in Maryland, in the US, firmly oppose the continued ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Corin Happel, followed by Monica O'Connor.
My name is Dr. Corinne Happel. I'm a board-certified pediatrician, allergist, immunologist, and mother of 5 children. I'm testifying today in support of Howard County Bill 1824, a Howard County Task Force on Transfer Tax Distribution Formula Reformation, as a possible way to fund deferred maintenance in the Howard County public school system. My husband and I moved with our children to Howard County in April of 2020, in large part because of the school system. My husband's an electrical engineer that works in Howard County, and I see patients in Baltimore. As we have seen the level of service decline in our public schools, we've begun to ask ourselves the difficult question: is living in Howard County worth it? Is it worth the high cost of living and the relatively low pay of our highly skilled jobs? We are not alone. We hear many families with similarly aged children who are wondering whether now is a good time to move out of Howard County or to switch to private or homeschool while their children are young enough to adjust to a new system. When we see enrollment numbers dropping in Howard County public schools, we're not surprised. Last year, my then 3rd grader was in a portable for his 3rd grade class. That was his homeroom. As an 8-year-old, whenever he needed to use the bathroom, he was supposed to find a buddy to take with him to walk to the main building. I have lost count of how many portables our elementary school has. When the admirable program of adding pre-kindergarten classes was started in the last couple of years at our school, no addition was made to the main building, so grade school students were moved outside. Our elementary school is not even on the list of schools that are up for renovations and additions in the approved 2025 capital budget 10-year master plan. The county recently pushed back the long overdue renovations and addition of the high school that my children are slated to attend. We hear that this keeps happening. If nothing changes and we are concerned that the timeline will be pushed back yet again, my current 4-year-old will see the renovations for her senior year of high school. My 1st grader, my 2nd grader, and my 4th grader who would attend the high school in its current state that has long deferred maintenance now. As a pediatrician, I can testify that the quality of the spaces that our children spend so many hours in matter. As an allergist immunologist, I can testify that poor air quality in old buildings harms children's health. We need to find a way to fund much needed improvements in all schools with deferred maintenance. This bill proposes a possible funding source. Please support it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have our last speaker now, Monica O'Connor.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say that I'm really moved by all the testimony tonight, and it's difficult to testify on something different than the ceasefire, but I do support the ceasefire and hope that you support it too. Chair Lamb, Chair Feldmark, and other members of the Howard County delegation, my name is Monica O'Connor. I'm a new resident to Howard County District 9B, and I'm co-chair of the Climate Justice Wing, a statewide grassroots organization of 30 groups focused on climate justice legislation. Thank you for this opportunity. Tonight, I'm urging the delegation to support two climate bills coming to the General Assembly: the Renew Act, sponsored by Senator Hester and Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, and the Better Buildings Act, sponsored by Senator Brooks and Delegate Guelfo. I moved to Delicate City just 2 months ago from Anne Arundel County. My husband and I bought a beautiful old home in the historic part of town. I'm thrilled to be learning about this important historic town, the ingenuity of the Ellicott brothers, the genius of Benjamin Banneker, and parts that Ellicott City played in the Civil War. It's truly a Maryland gem worth preserving. And like many other parts of Maryland, ground zero when it comes to the impacts of climate change. When my Anne Arundel County friends ask me, why we're moving to Howard County, Ellicott City, aren't you worried about flooding? I say, yes, aren't you worried about flooding? What about City Dock? The point is, no matter where we are in Maryland, whether it's flooding in Annapolis, Ellicott City, saltwater intrusion in Ghost Forest on the Eastern Shore, excessive heat in Baltimore, we're all dealing with climate change and its impacts on our infrastructure, our health, and our wallets. I knew about the back-to-back devastating floods before I moved here, but I just learned about the county's plan to cope in a world where residents can experience two 1,000-year floods in less than 2 years. And as you know, the county plans to dig a big 18-foot wide diameter tunnel under the city to divert water from Main Street at the cost of something around $228 million. This burden is falling on the shoulders of the taxpayers, which is truly a burden. This is why I enthusiastically support Senator Hester's bill, the Renew Act, which stands for Responding to Emergency Needs from Extreme Weather. The premise is simple. Maryland taxpayers should not be the ones paying for extreme weather. The polluting industries that cause the problem should. Right now, Marylanders are footing the bill for infrastructure investments made necessary by the climate crisis. The Renew Act takes the burdens off the taxpayer and puts it squarely on the shoulders of the largest international fossil fuel companies with a fee of $900 million a year for 10 years. These companies knew and lied about the climate crisis for nearly half a century, and just like the tobacco companies, they carried out deceptive campaigns, sowed enough doubt to block policies that would have reduced climate pollution, making billions and billions in profits. They should be the ones who pay, not Marylanders. Our tax money could be going to schools, fire stations, housing, so many good projects, but we must adapt. And for now, that either means higher taxes or less services. And that's why I urge you to support your colleague, Senator Hester, and the Renew Act. The second bill I urge this delegation to support is the Common Sense Better Buildings Act. I urge you to read Doug Siglin's testimony for a deeper dive into this bill. What I want to emphasize is this. We know we need to do more than build tunnels and walls to adapt to climate change. We need to build a resilient future that uses clean technology and emits less carbon. 13% of all carbon emissions in Maryland come from direct burning of fossil fuels in our homes, our schools, our churches, our workplaces, furnaces, hot water heaters, gas dryers, and stoves. If Maryland's going to reduce carbon emissions, which we know we need to do, we can't ignore the building sector. At this moment, my husband and I began the arduous task of transitioning our leaky, cold, inefficient home to efficient electric appliances. It's time-consuming and it's costly, but ultimately, when we switch our homes from gas to electric, we will produce less carbon emissions, feel more comfortable in a home, and save money. The Better Buildings Act isn't about this arduous transition. It's smart from the start. It's a smart approach that requires all new buildings to be powered without fossil fuels. Why put fuel pipes in the ground today that will last another 50 years when we know that we must make them obsolete? Single-fueled buildings are cheaper to build. The latest advances in electric technologies, such as heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, are up to 3 more times energy efficient and cheaper to operate than older technologies. What's more, efficient appliances require less energy and reduce pollution in and outside the homes. Transitioning existing buildings is an enormous undertaking. We must do it equitably because all Marylanders deserve to live in comfortable, cleaner, and more affordable homes. Building new buildings smart from the start just makes so much sense. We in Howard County know the cost of climate disasters. If passed, the Renew Act will take some of the burden of this cost off the backs of taxpayers, and the
Sorry,
Better
that's
Buildings
fine.
Act is a common sense solution for our future. Thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you. That is the end of the witnesses for our public hearing on statewide bills for this evening. I want to thank the members of the delegation who are on with us this evening. We will adjourn now and reconvene for our delegation meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Any parting words from our co-chair, Delegate Feldmark?
Get your rest. We've got a full agenda in the morning.
Great,
Have a
we're
good night.
adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening.